I've seen a lot of creators making the Boursin Orzo bake, but none of them make it the way I do. I found a way to make it easier, more nutritious, and more delicious, in my opinion. I am going to go step by step through the recipe to show you how it's made. I've also dropped it in the comments below, but here's a quick overview of the differences that I've implemented. The recipe calls for chicken stock. I add bone broth to most of my recipes to give it an extra protein and collagen boost. It helps me feel fuller longer, and it's just a little step that can really increase the nutrient density in the meal. The recipe calls for cloves of garlic, and this is my go-to. I love pre-minced garlic because it's delicious and easy, and that's what this channel is all about. Guys, I don't like sun-dried tomatoes, like at all, so I don't use them. Instead, I use roasted red peppers. You can get these at most grocery stores, and this jar is 340 milliliters. If you're swapping one for one, you're going to use a whole jar like this. So 340 milliliters of roasted red pepper is the same amount as the recipe calls for sun-dried tomatoes. That being said, I really like the roasted red pepper, so I get the big old jar from Costco and I use this instead. Disposable trays make for easy cleanup, and it is okay to take it easy on yourself. It is okay to use disposable products, especially if you're healing from an illness, an injury, if you're super stressed, or if you're hosting friends. This is a great meal to toss together quickly, pop it in the oven, let it cook. I also add chicken to the recipe. I just use a rotisserie chicken, which you can pick up at just about any grocery store. I shred that up and add it in right at the beginning. It reheats as the pasta cooks, and it's all delicious, hot, yummy goodness. The other choice that I make is to not put spinach into the bake. Instead, I like to have a fresh green salad. For me, it just offers something a little light. There's a little bit of tang with the salad dressing, so it balances the pasta. At least that's the way I like it. Let's dive in. I usually try to get home from the grocery store and take all of the meat off of the carcass. I find that while the chicken is still warm, it is a bit easier to remove the meat from the bones. Obviously, I was having a low energy day yesterday when I picked up this chicken, so I'm going to need to do that step now, and then I will chop up the chicken so it's a little bit smaller. Because the recipe calls for 4 cups of chicken stock, I'm using a 9 by 13 pan. It might seem a little too large until you end up adding in the liquid. I'm starting by putting my Boursin right in the middle and then dumping 2 cups of orzo around it. Since I'm using pre-minced garlic, I'm just taking a couple of good heaping tablespoons and putting it in there. And then I'm using 1 cup of roasted red peppers. I really like the roasted red pepper, so you can always add more in. And then drizzle 2 tablespoons of oil from the jar. I've mixed up 4 cups of chicken stock and added in a few tablespoons of bone broth. Once that's in with the orzo, I'll add a half a teaspoon of basil, a half a teaspoon of oregano, and then I omit the salt and pepper because I find that the Boursin and the stock make it salty enough as it is, especially once the cheese gets added in at the end. I give that a bit of a mixy mix and then cover the pan with aluminum foil and pop it into the oven for about 20 minutes at 425 degrees. I've made this recipe a few times, and at the 20-minute mark, when I remove the foil and add the cheese, I always get a bit panicky because there is still a lot of liquid left, and that's okay. It is all going to get absorbed. I've mixed in over 1.5 cups of cheese, even though the original recipe called for 1.5 cups of cheese, because everything is better when it's cheesier. I've used a mixture of mozzarella and parmesan because that's what I had in my freezer. At this stage, you're gonna give it another mixy mix. You're gonna leave it uncovered and then leave it for another 20 minutes. When you check on it, you're going to have to kind of make a decision on how your oven is working and how your orzo's coming together. Mine took another 20 minutes because it was still so watery and soupy. So make sure you plan accordingly. And that's it, my friends. There are so many ways to tweak this recipe and make it your own. If you have tried this recipe and you've made other changes, please drop them in the comments below and let's figure out some ways to switch this up even more. Thank you so much for your time. I hope that this recipe works out for you. And remember that you are not alone trying to make cooking fresh food a little bit easier.